To further discuss the controversy involving New York's governor, I want to welcome South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace to the program. Hi, Congresswoman. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
So I want to ask you about this. You've joined your fellow Oversight Committee Republicans in urging Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney to subpoena Governor Cuomo to testify before the panel on the nursing home COVID deaths in New York. Have you gotten any sort of word that the Congresswoman will subpoena Cuomo? And I also want to get your response to the sexual harassment claims against the governor, which surfaced this week.
Right, I just heard about the sexual harassment claims this afternoon. I haven't read anything about it, but any sort of sexual harassment should be investigated to the fullest extent of the law, whether you're an elected official or not. It's simply wrong and should be investigated. Regarding the Cuomo and having a hearing in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, I joined my colleagues to have that investigated. For months now, we've been hearing about how many deaths there have been across the country to COVID-19, and then you can look no further than New York, where the governor of New York won an Emmy for his work on COVID-19, and come to find out thousands of our elderly patients passed away through no fault of their own because they were exposed to COVID, and the governor tried to cover it up.
Have you heard word if Chairwoman Maloney is going to subpoena Cuomo at all? Any word, any signal as to what action she might be taking?
I have heard absolutely nothing about a hearing on this issue, and it's very discouraging not to hear back. But we've got to have our questions answered on this issue, and it needs to be investigated to the fullest extent of the law.
All right. The White House press secretary said earlier this month that the administration holds a bold and ambitious goal of reopening 50% of schools for 1 day of in-person learning each week by April. Now, data from the CDC doesn't seem to support that approach. They're saying that the research overwhelmingly shows in-person learning poses minimal risks to students and teachers in terms of possible infection. Now, you're a mother yourself. From your own experience, are you concerned that not opening schools immediately is going to have irreversible impacts on students and their families?
Well, we know not reopening schools right now when it's safe to do so is having a extremely detrimental effect on our children. We have more than 30% of high school students who are going to the ER for mental health emergencies. We have a 600% increase in a failure rate in academics in our education system because we're doing virtual school. And having half the schools open 1 day a week by May is neither bold nor is it ambitious. And the guidelines that the Biden administration is handing down to the states, if we were to follow those and enact those, the schools that are open now, 90% of them would have to be shut down. If we follow the science, and Democrats love to talk about data and the science and what Dr. Fauci is saying and the CDC, well, the science proves that our kids, when there are certain precautions in place, they are safe to learn at school. And we have many children, millions of children across the country who get nutrition, get breakfast and lunch at school, who don't have access to the internet, but they need their education. If you want to talk about lifting people out of poverty, we need to get our kids back in school.
And staying on the topic of the pandemic, we know that the House is expected to vote this week on that nearly $2 trillion COVID relief package that the Democrats introduced. The consensus from many Republicans that I've spoken with, it's too expensive, it's irresponsible, since there's a lot in there that's not directly related to the pandemic. But then, you know, there's been recent polling that shows the $1,400 checks to Americans are overwhelmingly popular. So I want to know, where do you stand on the package? Are there aspects you do support and think are necessary?
Right. I don't even believe we can call this a COVID-19 relief package. Only 1% of the money is being spent in this package, $1.9 trillion. 1% is being spent on COVID-19 vaccinations. Even worse, you look at less than 9% overall of all the spending is going to any type of COVID relief. And get this, Nancy Pelosi is getting to build an underground rail system, over $100 million in her own backyard. So that has nothing to do with COVID-19, and we have millions of people who are out of work, millions of kids who are desperate to get back to school, and millions of people who are desperate to get their vaccinations so we can get some sense of normalcy and improve our economic conditions and look for getting back to work and earning our wages again. That's not happening under this COVID-19 package. This is just a free-for-all spending spree.
If you had to pick and choose items to pass immediately from this package, what would you be choosing?
I I'm okay with sending a check to someone who's been out of work, lost wages, significant sums of money this year due to COVID-19. In this package right now, as it stands, somebody making $75,000 a year who didn't lose their job, who didn't lose wages, was not impacted by COVID-19 would get a stimulus check. And so we've got to make sure that the things that are important, targeted relief to small businesses who've had to have their doors shut or have lost businesses, and targeted relief to those who truly have been affected negatively and lost wages and lost their jobs due to COVID-19. That is precisely where this money should go, that and vaccinations, and that's a package every American can support.
All right, I want to switch topics, Congresswoman. The House voting on the Equality Act today, as I mentioned. It's been a pretty controversial topic on the Hill. How do you plan to vote on this measure today?
Right, I'll be voting against the Equality Act if we vote on that later today. I'm a pro-LGBTQ Republican. I support equal rights for everyone, regardless of your orientation, color of your skin, gender, etc., you name it. But there are provisions in here that violate the First Amendment, that violate religious freedom, that we need to be respectful and mindful of. And there are other pieces of legislation that do that, that have those protections, and that's what we should be talking about. There's been a lot of talk about unity this year in 2021, and that's just not happening right now. Everything we're working on is partisan all the way through and through, and it's very disappointing to see that.
Okay, and then finally, you filed legislation that seeks to block the Biden administration from bringing Gitmo detainees on American soil right to your state, actually. Are you in communication with the administration at all on a plan to close down the facility, or do you know what options are being explored right now?
Based on some of the news reports we've seen in the last few weeks, Congressman Jeff Duncan, a member of the South Carolina delegation, and I filed this legislation together during the Obama administration when there was word that he wanted to shut down Gitmo. This is the same policy that the Biden administration has said in news reports and in interviews that they wanted to shut Gitmo down. When Obama tried to do it, one of the first places he wanted to send terrorists was to the Charleston Navy brig, and that is the last place where South Carolina wants to house terrorists, would be in our own state, shouldn't be on U.S. soil. So we want to be sure that we get ahead of the issue, we tackle the issue ahead of time and let people know that this is a very real possibility. We do everything we can to prevent it from happening.
All right, South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace taking the time to speak with One American News about several important topics. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.